There was something deeply satisfying, Jane Carter thought, about watching a five-eyed alien with 17 medals on his chest fumble with a pair of handcuffs. They had her surrounded. 12 members of the Saraiki Elite Enforcement Unit, standing shoulder to shoulder in immaculate iridium-plated uniforms that probably cost more than her college degree. The cuffs, however, were made for someone with tentacles. And Jane? Well, Jane had only the standard 2 arms and an overdeveloped sense of sarcasm. "I'd offer to help," she said, holding out her wrists with exaggerated patience, "but I left my manual on alien law enforcement for dummies back on Earth." Commander Zyrol, the nearest officer and proud owner of all 5 of those jittering eyes, twitched his mandibles. "You are under arrest. Do not mock the honor of Saraiki procedure." "Sorry," Jane said brightly. "Didn't realize your honor came with Velcro." The cuffs finally snapped shut. Zyrol stepped back with the gravitas of someone expecting thunderous applause. All he got was the sound of Jane's vintage Casio wristwatch scraping indignantly against alien alloy. "Careful," she said, raising an eyebrow. "That thing survived the Reagan administration." They didn't laugh. Of course they didn't. The Drassi weren't known for humor, or irony, or really anything outside of enforcement, order, and the precise angle at which a ceremonial blade should be held during sentencing. "Ambassador Jane Carter," Zyrol intoned, "you stand charged with subversion of galactic protocol, weaponized rhetoric, and emotional destabilization." Jane blinked. "Emotional destabilization?" He glared. "You made the Varric ambassador weep for 47 minutes. His tears ignited the table." "I said his tie looked like it belonged on a rejected figure skating costume," Jane replied. "It wasn't personal." He asked for feedback. "You also incited planetary panic on June 7. I taught them about sarcasm." "You're welcome." Zyrol gestured sharply. The guards formed up. Jane was marched down the docking corridor, cuffs glinting beneath flickering lights. The floor hummed underfoot, vibrating with that odd, sterile rhythm only found on ships built by creatures who didn't sleep. Outside the portholes, the Galactic Assembly's flagship, the Intrepid Harmony, loomed like a sermon in metal. 1,000,000 tons of diplomacy, threat, and polished marble interiors. Jane knew the type. She'd walked its halls before in less dramatic circumstances. This time, though, she'd brought backup. Well, sort of. The guards shoved open the tribunal chamber doors. The space beyond was all glowing panels and uncomfortable furniture. 12 species were represented: feathers, scales, gelatin, bark, and in one case, sentient gas in a floating orb. Each representative looked deeply uncomfortable. Jane, still cuffed, stepped forward. "Ambassador Carter," came a slow voice, translated instantly into her ear by a buzzing implant. It belonged to Elder Thrix, a translucent green being whose voice always made her think of NPR at 2 a.m. "You stand accused of violating Article 19 of interstellar conduct." Jane tilted her head. "The one about using words as weapons." "That is a simplification, but accurate." A ripple went through the room. Some of the diplomats looked away. A few muttered. One actually hissed. Thrix lifted what passed for an eyebrow. "Do you deny that your presence in intergalactic affairs has caused unrest?" "I deny that unrest is always a bad thing," Jane said. "Sometimes the pot needs stirring. Even if the pot contains diplomatic order. If the order's stale? Absolutely." Zyrol slammed a hand on the table. "Enough." "Agreed," Jane said. "I'm starving. Do we get snacks during this?" "Galactic law says I'm entitled to at least a protein bar and a glass of weird blue liquid, right?" "You take this lightly." She shrugged, the cuffs jingling. "You take me lightly. That's your mistake." Before anyone could respond, a quiet chirp sounded from the wall. Zyrol tensed. Thrix blinked slowly. The rest of the room turned toward the image materializing on the central screen. Security footage. From the docking bay. It showed a woman standing at the gate. Short, round, human. Her hair was silver, pulled into a stubborn bun. She wore a blue cardigan with small embroidered cats and held a floral handbag that looked like it hadn't changed since Earth's 1980s. She waved. smiled, adjusted her orthopedic sandals. "Who is that?" hissed one of the delegates. Jane beamed. "That's Edith Carter." "Is she security?" "No. Military." "Not technically." Zyrol leaned in. "Then why is she here?" "She's my mother." Silence slammed the room like a falling satellite. "Your mother," Thrix repeated slowly. Jane nodded. "Galactic law permits each diplomat under legal duress to bring a psychological support entity. I filed the paperwork." Triple stamped. Zyrol was already tapping at a console. His mandibles clicked. "Then, it checks out. She requested entrance an hour ago," Jane added. "I believe she brought banana bread." Thrix stared at the screen, which now zoomed in on Edith pulling a small tin out of her tote and offering it to a horrified security droid. "She is not standard." "No," Jane agreed. "She's Texan." More silence. Then, a few nervous whispers. "Ambassador Carter," Thrix said carefully, "does your maternal figure pose a threat?" "Only to people who interrupt her stories or disrespect table manners." The room rippled again, this time with something heavier. Unease. The kind that came from knowing the rules had technically been followed, but the outcome made no sense. Jane watched them all. The stony-faced insectoids. The amphibious sentients with flickering gill frills. The floating orb that dimmed its light in confusion. Each of them had mastered trade, warfare, diplomacy. But none of them had a protocol for Earth mothers. She once stared down a rampaging bison with nothing but a purse and a lemon drop. Jane added helpfully. "She cannot be allowed in," Zyrol growled. "She's already past security." Jane said sweetly, "I'd recommend you offer her tea." The door to the tribunal chamber buzzed. Everyone froze. Then, slowly, swung open. And in walked Edith Carter. The air changed. Literally. One of the delegates from the Frondarian pollen race sneezed violently. Edith paused, scanning the room. Her eyes were kind, but sharp. She moved with the slow dignity of someone who could knit a sweater and take over a small country at the same time. She spotted Jane. Her face softened. "There's my girl," she said. Jane grinned. "Hi, Mama. You didn't tell me they had such lovely carpets." "I nearly wore the wrong shoes." Zyrol tried. He really did. "You are not authorized to enter." Edith looked at him. Just looked. Zyrol faltered. "I brought banana bread," she said, walking forward. "Made with Terran wheat, fresh eggs, and a bit of nutmeg. No synthetic preservatives." "Madam." She turned to the council. "Now, I don't mean to interrupt all this fine judging, but my daughter's been locked up without so much as a cheese stick, and that is what I call poor manners." Jane saw it happen. The flicker of confusion, the mental scramble for cultural precedent, the realization that none existed. Edith set the bread on the tribunal bench. Then, she pulled a folded paper from her purse. "This here is the Earth document called a PDA resolution. I'd like it entered into consideration." Thrix blinked. "PT. Parent-Teacher Association," Jane murmured. "Do not underestimate their power." Edith nodded. "I chaired this committee back in 2037. We handled rogue school boards and a raccoon infestation. You think this tribunal scares me?" No one answered. Jane leaned back slightly, her cuffs now seeming ornamental. Zyrol cleared his throat. "We are in the middle of a formal hearing." "And I'm in the middle of a 3-day bake sale prep," Edith replied. "Yet here I am." Priorities. Thrix floated forward, uncertain. "Your presence may complicate things." "I certainly hope so." Another silence. Then, from somewhere in the back, a faint sound, sniffling. Jane turned. The jelly-based ambassador of Geller, 6, was crying. Silently, gooey tears dripping down his sides. "She reminds me of my hatch mother," he whispered. Edith smiled. "Well, sugar, I'm glad to hear that. Everyone needs a good mom, now and then." Jane looked at the rest of the room. Eyes were moist. Mandibles trembled. Someone hiccuped. Edith pulled a handkerchief from her purse, handed it to a slime diplomat who immediately disintegrated it by accident. She didn't flinch. "I think," Jane said, "we can call recess." Zyrol opened his mouth, closed it. Thrix murmured, "Yes. Yes, perhaps we should reassess everything." Jane turned to her mother. How's the garden back home? Peppers are growing wild. That new neighbor tried to steal one. He's in the hospital. Hospital. Sprained his wrist, tripping over his own ego. The tribunal remained frozen, the sound of quiet sobbing echoing through the chamber. Jane, still in cuffs, leaned back and smiled. In 20 seconds, the most feared alien tribunal in the galaxy had gone from judicial fury to existential unraveling. And all it took was one mother from Plano, Texas. Jane's cuffs clicked open with the faintest hiss, as if even the security system was second-guessing itself in the presence of Edith Carter. The tribunal chamber remained locked in its confused hush. Delegates sniffled and blinked, unsure if protocol demanded tissues or force fields. Some simply stared at Edith like she was an apex predator in polyester. Edith, unfazed, patted her daughter's wrists and checked for chafing. I told them not to use restraints on my girl, she murmured, loud enough for Zyrol to hear. She bruises easy. Always has. Jane leaned in. You've been here 5 minutes, and already you're undermining galactic law. I raised 3 boys, honey. This is nothing. Zyrol's voice reemerged from behind clenched mandibles. This tribunal is not a family reunion. Shame, Edith replied, eyes narrowing. Might have taught you something about hospitality. Thrix, to his eternal credit, tried to regain order. His voice floated in soft waves. Madam Carter, while your entrance was unorthodox, it appears your presence is legally protected under Galactic Provision 12 Theta, Clause 9. Edith smiled sweetly. Comfort entity. Yes, Thrix nodded slowly. Though you are the first to exercise this clause in such a dynamic fashion. Shouldn't have written the law that way if you didn't want Texans showing up with baked goods and a purpose. Jane gave Thrix a half-smile. That's what you get for leaving loopholes and inviting lawyers to the galaxy. Are you a lawyer? Thrix asked. No, Jane said. But I was raised by one. She's currently unwrapping a lemon drop with lethal intent. Edith, indeed, was noisily peeling the candy. Every crinkle of the wrapper sounded like a countdown. The floating jelly ambassador, who had cried earlier, sniffed. She reminds me of the old stories, the primal caretakers, the fire mothers, the ones who made rules and broke bones. Edith's expression softened. You're a sweet puddle of goo, aren't you? Jane coughed. Focus, please. The tribunal recentered around a large semicircular dais, glowing with organic light. As Edith took the auxiliary seat beside Jane, the screen behind them shimmered to life, displaying documentation pulled from Earth's archives. Jane's file appeared first: multiple diplomatic missions, linguistic disruptions, cultural rebalancing infractions, for counts of linguistic terrorism. The term had been coined after a joke she made caused a minor war between 2 pride-based species, and one confirmed emotional incident involving planetary-scale heartbreak. Then, a second file flickered in. Edith's. No official galactic file existed. Instead, her digital dossier had been scraped from Open Earth records. Local PDA president, 3-time Chili cook-off winner, honorary sheriff's deputy, ceremonial but armed, and chair of the neighborhood watch. Zyrol squinted. How is this relevant? Jane didn't blink. You tried to arrest someone with the moral weight of an entire suburb. Edith clicked her tongue. Your counsel lacks seasoning. Madam Carter, Thrix interrupted carefully, you have invoked your right to act as your daughter's psychological counsel during these proceedings. Are you prepared to offer a defense? Edith reached into her purse. Out came a stack of laminated note cards, color-coded and tabbed. I've got footnotes, sweet pea. Jane tilted her head. You made an index? You think I raised kids without an index? I had folders on you before you could spell existential rebellion. Fair. Thrix raised a shimmering hand. Please begin. Edith stood. Her tone shifted, not louder, but deeper. Solid. She didn't yell. She didn't need to. The room leaned forward. My daughter is charged with subversion. But what, I ask you, has she truly subverted? Fragile egos? Ceremonial arrogance? She didn't break your laws. She exposed your fears. A low murmur rippled through the assembly. Edith continued. You talk about protocols like they're sacred texts, but you let my girl walk into rooms with nothing but her wits and a pair of boots, and then you cry foul when she uses M. You made her ambassador. Then you tried to hang her for being good at it. Zyrol interrupted. She taught the Vexorians irony. They needed it, Edith shot back. You folks were one passive-aggressive compliment away from nuclear war. Thrix held up a palm. Madam Carter, we understand your protective instincts, but the charges are serious. So is banana bread, Edith said, walking over and slicing a piece. But we're not losing sleep over it. You baked it yourself? Thrix asked. Of course. Thrix looked down at his shimmering fingers. Could I have a piece? Help yourself, sugar. Jane suppressed a grin as a gelatinous diplomat extended 3 pseudopods toward the plate. Zyrol seethed. This is a court of interstellar law. This is a farce, Edith countered. And it's not even a good one. I've seen better organized PDA bake sales. Jane stood now, calm and cool. She's not wrong. Zyrol snapped. You manipulated a Dfeckian peace negotiation with a quote from an Earth action film. I said yippee-ki-yay during a toast, Jane replied. It got the room laughing. Which was the point? Your actions caused instability. My actions prevented a missile launch. Thrix shifted in his chair. And the incident with the Krent ambassador's wedding? I taught them the chicken dance, Jane said. It brought both families together. She desecrated tradition, Zyrol barked. She created harmony, Edith replied. Just not the kind you're used to. Another ambassador, an amphibian with golden eyes, cleared her throat. The humans' methods are unorthodox. But so are their results. No other diplomat has reduced conflict metrics so drastically. Because no one knows how to handle them, Zyrol snapped. They quote movies, wear strange shirts, and speak in riddles. Jane's t-shirt that day read, Houston, we have sarcasm. Edith folded her arms. Are you afraid of the fact that my daughter is clever, or just that she doesn't play the way you expect? I fear chaos, Zyrol said. And she's chaos. Jane offered a small smile. Only if you insist on order at all costs. Silence held for a moment. Then Thrix sighed. Regardless of sentiment, there are still protocols. And one final charge remains. The screen flickered. A file opened. Psychological contagion risk. Jane Carter. Zyrol leaned forward. Your words have spread. Your mannerisms. Your humor. It's leaking into the system. Security teams have started quoting her. Jane tried not to grin. Ambassadors laugh at inappropriate times. Officers have been seen doing that Earth eyebrow thing. You've infected the very soul of intergalactic diplomacy. Edith leaned in. Sounds like a cultural exchange to me. Jane added, do you want peace, or do you just want quiet obedience? The room hesitated. Then, the jelly ambassador spoke up again. I find their irreverence refreshing. A whisper followed. Then, another. The amphibian diplomat nodded. Perhaps it is not infection. Perhaps it is adaptation. Thrix stared at them, then at Jane. What would you suggest? Drop the charges. Rewrite the codes. Let things evolve. Zyrol snarled. This is the fall of order. No, Edith said, this is its rebirth. You can't legislate culture. You can't cage personality. My daughter didn't destroy your rules, she made them breathe. Thrix exhaled slowly. We will recess for deliberation. The room emptied in near silence, except for the faint squeak of Edith's sandals. Jane leaned back, rubbing her wrists. That was something. Edith began folding her note cards. You always were a mess magnet. I just figured I'd bring 'em up. Thank Mom. Next time, Edith said, we bring your Aunt Darlene. She's got even stronger opinions. Jane chuckled. Let's see how they handle Texas squared. Before they could speak again, the door opened. Thrix returned, alone. We cannot expunge your record, he said, but we can commute the charges. Jane nodded. Fair. On one condition. She raised an eyebrow. Your mother remains on the diplomatic registry as a cultural advisor. Jane blinked. You want to put Edith Carter on payroll? Thrix sighed. At this point, it's safer to have her with us than against. Jane turned to her mother, who was sipping from a thermos. "You in?" Edith smiled. "Let's show the galaxy how manners are done." The alarm wasn't supposed to sound during a diplomatic lunch, especially not when the menu included vegan-compatible space risotto and Edith Carter's homemade cornbread, which by all accounts had become an interstellar sensation in less than 3 days. Delegates from 12 species had shown up to this informal human peace potluck. Smiles had been exchanged. Laughs had been shared. Tentacles had hesitantly learned the art of the handshake. Then the sirens went off. A chorus of stuttering klaxons echoed through the polished halls of the Intrepid Harmony. The sound was shrill, chaotic, and, most telling, human-designed. Jane shot to her feet, eyes already scanning the ceiling. "That's not standard." "Did someone tamper with the alert system?" Thrix asked, his transparent skin dimming from green to pale lilac. "No," Jane muttered. "That's an Earth-grade panic siren. 1984 model. That means someone's system got hacked, or they just threw a hissy fit so dramatic it triggered backup code." She turned to Edith, who stood calmly at the refreshment table, slicing cornbread with the same grace one might use to disarm a bomb. "You do something?" Jane asked. "Not yet," Edith replied, tucking a slice into a cloth napkin. "But I imagine I'm about to." The doors flew open. A battalion of Drassy security drones stormed in, led by a commander Jane didn't recognize. Not Zyrol. This one was younger, angrier, less afraid of Edith. He didn't stay that way for long. "Ambassador Carter," he barked, pointing a 2-barreled pulse rifle at Jane's chest. "You are to come with us. Effective immediately. You are declared a Class C subversive entity." The room recoiled. Several diplomats rose. One even hissed. Thrick stood. "This is outrageous. We were in mid-dialogue. There are no current charges." "The order comes from the Central Enforcement Corps," the new commander snapped. "They reviewed her record. Her words are destabilizing. Her presence, too dangerous." Jane raised both hands slowly, palms out. "Let me guess. You skipped the paperwork again." He didn't answer. Behind him, the drones fanned out. Red lights pulsed across their forearms, tiny claws twitching like caffeinated spiders. Jane took one step forward. "I'm unarmed." "Irrelevant." Thrix moved between them. "She is protected under diplomatic protocol." The commander hesitated. That's when Edith cleared her throat. Every head turned. She stepped into the center of the room like a woman entering a church bake-off with blood in her eyes. "I don't like weapons in my dining room," she said, voice low and firm. "You are not authorized to speak." "You brought guns to a lunch," Edith continued. "Pointed one at my child. That's not courage. That's rudeness wrapped in metal. Stand down, civilian." Edith opened her purse. The commander flinched. One drone took a step back. Jane whispered, "Oh no." Out came a tube of lipstick. The color was called Solar Flare, banned on 3 luxury moons for being too distracting. "You're making a mistake," Jane said calmly. "She's not a threat. Technically. I've seen that purse disable a custom station," Thrix added. "Twice." The commander didn't budge. Restrain both humans. The drones moved. It lasted 20 seconds. The first drone lunged. Edith spun, her purse swinging in a graceful arc. Something inside clicked. The drone's chest imploded with a small pop and the smell of cinnamon. Jane had never figured out how her mom did that. The second one activated a shield. Edith pulled out a roll of duct tape, tore off a strip, and flung it. The tape hit the shield, sparked, and then expanded. It wrapped the drone in 6 layers of noise-canceling insulation and 2 world's best grandma stickers. 3 more approached. Edith dropped her handbag to the floor, reached inside without looking, and produced a thermos. With a twist of the cap, a pressurized stream of boiling liquid launched out, scalding the targeting sensors of the closest unit. "Is that coffee?" Jane whispered. "Café Bustelo," Edith said. "Hot enough to melt ego." 2 drones retreated. One did not. It raised a heavy stun cannon. Jane's instinct screamed. She lunged, but Edith beat her to it. Out came a VHS copy of Die Hard. She flung it like a shuriken. It hit the cannon's sensor lens, bounced, and clattered to the floor. The drone systems glitched, confused by the outdated format. It whirred, stuttered, and exploded into harmless holograms of Bruce Willis, saying, "Welcome to the party, pal." The commander fell back. "Hold fire," he screamed. "She's using temporal subversion tech." Jane doubled over laughing. "It's a videotape, you idiot." The diplomats weren't laughing. They were applauding. And then the room collapsed into chaos. Security reinforcements arrived. More drones. 2 hover tanks. An elite telepathic regulator who promptly collapsed when Edith looked him in the eyes and asked if he'd eaten breakfast. Jane ducked under a table, grabbed Edith by the arm, and dragged her toward the corridor. "We need to leave." "I still have my purse." "That's what worries me." They burst into the hall, alarms blaring, the smell of cornbread, ozone, and righteous defiance lingering behind them. Thrix joined moments later, panting wide-eyed. "You've broken every interstellar safety code," he said between breaths. "No," Jane corrected. "They broke the truce." "What is she?" Thrix asked, glancing nervously at Edith. "A kindergarten teacher," Jane said. "Retired. Knits, bakes, organizes school fundraisers. Also once talked down a gang war in a Walmart parking lot using nothing but a whistle and a coupon book." "I can't protect you now." "Don't need protection," Jane replied. "Just directions to the comms chamber." "Why?" "I'm going to call Earth." "You're invoking planetary retaliation?" "I'm calling Aunt Darlene." Thrix paled. "There's another?" Jane ran. The trio darted through the station, dodging confusion, flames, and the lingering sound of Bruce Willis quotes echoing through the halls. Word was spreading. A diplomatic incident. A cultural anomaly. A security breach caused by Perse. They reached the comms chamber. Jane keyed into a secure line. Edith calmly began refilling her purse. Jane didn't ask what she was putting in it. Just as she opened the channel, an emergency broadcast beat her to it. Every screen on the ship lit up. A red warning blared across the systems in 36 languages. Warning: human matriarch entity detected. Emotional threat level apocalyptic. If encountered, offer tea and stand down immediately. Jane blinked. "They've flagged her," Thrix whispered. "You understand what this means? She's now officially classified as a planetary class deterrent." Edith zipped her purse. "I don't like that word. Makes me sound like gas." Jane turned to her mother, who looked back with calm amusement. "You just beat a tactical assault team using household items and 80s pop culture." "They started it." "I know." A pause. Then Edith smiled, soft and fond. "I didn't come to fight, Janie. I came to protect you. That's all I ever wanted." Jane's throat tightened. "I know, Mama." Footsteps thundered down the corridor. Zyrol appeared, flanked by diplomats and surviving drones. He looked exhausted. "I have a proposal." Edith raised one eyebrow. Zyrol cleared his throat. "You will leave this ship. Immediately. You will never return. But your status will remain intact. No criminal charges. No sanctions. And my daughter? Same. Under one condition." Jane stepped forward. "Let's hear it." Zyrol stared directly at Edith. "You give us the banana bread recipe." Jane blinked. "That's it." Zyrol looked haunted. "We need it. The cafeteria staff have begun rioting. The Varric ambassador offered to marry a loaf. This is bigger than pride now." Edith looked thoughtful. 2 sticks of butter," she said. "Real, not replicated. And don't skimp on the nutmeg." Zyrol bowed. The agreement was silent but solid. As the humans left the comms chamber, Jane looked over her shoulder. "You realize," she said, "you just altered diplomatic protocol using pastry." Edith slung her purse over her shoulder. "I told you, sugar. I bake with purpose." The ship calmed as they made their way back to the diplomatic dock. Screens still flickered with warnings. Delegates peeked from behind corners. Not one drone dared block their path. Jane glanced at the corridor's last security camera and gave it a wink. "Yippee-ki-yay," she whispered. Jane Carter stood at the edge of the Galactic Assembly Central Dome, surrounded by alien leaders who'd spent the last 4 hours arguing over whether her mother's banana bread constituted an emotional weapon. The holographic treaty hovered in the center of the chamber, flickering every time the hologram's built-in AI tried to reconcile non-hostile homemade offering with planetary panic index. It wasn't going well. Thrix floated to Jane's side, his glow dim but hopeful. We've reached consensus on 37 out of 40 clauses. It's the final 3 where complications remain. Jane pinched the bridge of her nose. Let me guess. Clause 12. Yes, Thrix murmured. The official status of human matriarchal entities in galactic diplomatic affairs. She's not a weapon, Jane muttered. She's just Southern. Be that as it may, Thrix said, casting a wary glance at the refreshment table. Madam Carter currently holds more influence than most battle fleets. Edith sat at that very table, calmly knitting a sweater for someone's larval ambassador child. Several delegates hovered nearby in obvious fear, disguised as fascination. One of them had attempted to touch her purse earlier. He had not tried again. Could we just give them the recipe and move on? Jane whispered. We did, Thrix replied. It triggered 5 chemical alerts and 2 religious awakenings. Jane sighed. Of course it did. Zyrol approached, shoulders tense, flanked by officers who now wore aprons and oven mitts instead of weapons. It had been his idea, unofficially, to disarm by distraction. It had worked with terrifying efficiency. Edith had them baking within an hour. They now deferred to her like terrified sous chefs under a smiling but unpredictable celebrity host. We have a proposal, Zyrol said tightly. Jane raised an eyebrow, and he handed her a datapad. We accept the peace accords, with one condition. She scrolled through. The condition wasn't written in code. It was plain English. Earth shall dispatch a single human matriarch-class entity as an emotional peacekeeping presence in all high-risk diplomatic summits. Frequency, biannual. Preferred configuration, Texan, armed with snacks. Jane stared. Let me get this straight, she said slowly. You want my mother as part of a standing peacekeeping corps? She prevents conflict, Zyrol muttered, or causes it in ways that make weapons unnecessary. And you're okay with that? I am not, Zyrol admitted. But the Jelly Ambassador has been humming Earth lullabies since Tuesday, and someone embroidered her face onto our council flag. Jane glanced over. Sure enough, a velvet banner now fluttered quietly near the council stage, stitched with the words, Mind your manners, and a smiling Edith holding a slice of pie. And the banana bread? Jane asked. It must be declared a cultural artifact, Zyrol said grimly. Interplanetary distribution only with license. We lost a scout vessel to a black market crumbs syndicate yesterday. Jane blinked. Someone smuggled banana breadcrumbs. They formed a cult. Jane fought a smile. You realize how absurd all this is. Zyrol didn't flinch. You win, Ambassador. But you've changed the galaxy in ways I can't even begin to comprehend. It was never about winning, she said softly. It was about being heard. He hesitated. You were. Jane turned and walked back to Edith. Her mother was now teaching a towering reptilian ambassador how to knit. He had 6 claws and the focus of a toddler with caffeine. Still, he tried. Edith smiled, patient. Jane sat beside her. They want to make you official. Oh, Edith said without looking up. Galactic Matriarchal Peace Consultant. Edith nodded. Can I still bring banana bread? I think that's the only reason they're agreeing to this. Well, sugar, Edith said, tying off a knot in the yarn. If they need a mama to keep them in line, I suppose I can manage. You'll be a legend. I already am, Edith replied. I raised you, didn't I? Jane chuckled. Thanks, Mama. Always. The final ceremony began at dusk cycle. Dozens of races assembled in the dome. Flags were unfurled. Treaties were encoded into crystal. Even the sentient gas beings wore tiny honorary sashes. The newly negotiated peace accord, titled the Banana Bread Resolution, was ratified in 36 unanimous votes. Thrix delivered the closing speech. Today, he said solemnly, we do not only sign peace. We acknowledge a force greater than tradition, greater than formality. We acknowledge the power of human emotion, volatile, unpredictable, and oddly comforting. He turned to Edith. We welcome the first officially appointed human matriarchal consultant. May she carry our fragile egos in her handbag and shield our negotiations with her judgmental glances. The applause was thunderous. Some delegates cried. One proposed marriage. Edith politely declined. Jane and her mother stood near the exit afterward, waiting for the Earth shuttle. "Are you sure you're ready for this?" Jane asked. Edith looked up at the stars beyond the dome. "I've kept the peace between toddlers and teenagers in a house with no air conditioning during Texas summers. I can handle the galaxy." Jane smiled, pride warming her chest. "You changed everything." "No," Edith replied. "You did. I just showed up when things got messy." The shuttle doors opened. A pilot leaned out. "Ambassador Carter?" "Madam Consultant." "Coming," Jane said. Edith paused, looked back. Several ambassadors stood waving. She nodded once, then stepped inside. As the shuttle lifted off, the central broadcast chimed. A voice crackled across all systems, echoing from moons to motherships. "This is the Galactic Assembly. We confirm a new era of diplomacy, one of understanding, empathy, and occasional baked goods. All member species are advised to update threat assessments accordingly." A second voice came through. It was human, male, cheerful. "Earth to Galactic Assembly. Copy that. Also, Mama Carter says the next summit's in Dallas. Y'all bring your own chairs." Jane leaned against the cabin wall and looked at her mother. "You really did it." "I just made breakfast," Edith replied. Outside, the galaxy spun on, but it was quieter now, kinder. And wherever things flared, where words failed and negotiations turned to threats, there would always be someone on standby. A woman with a purse full of reason, a heart full of fire, and banana bread that could stop wars. Peace had never tasted so sweet.